warm welcome to all. A very good afternoon to all our guests joining in from the UK. A good evening to all our guests joining in from India and South Asia. And a very good morning to all our guests joining in from the US and South America. Today is the third seminar in the second edition of this seminar series on the digital future for business and society, emerging perspectives on AI, blockchain, and IoT. This seminar series has been hosted jointly by Professor Yogesh Dwivedi, who is a professor of digital marketing and innovation, founding director of the Emerging Markets Research Center, and co-director of research, School of Management, Swansea University, Wales, UK. Our co-host for the seminar series is Professor Raman, Director, SIBM Pune, Dean, Faculty of Management, Symbiosis International University, and Director, Strategy and Development, Symbiosis. Our entire seminar series is jointly supported by the Center for Technology, Innovation, Management and Enterprise, TIME, the University of Kent, UK, Digital Marketing and Analytics, SIG, Academy of Marketing, Grenoble IAE Graduate School of Management, a Grenoble INP School of the University of Grenoble Alps, the e-Business and e-Government SIG, British Academy of Management, and the UK Academy for Information Systems, UKAIS. To tell you something about the seminar series itself, emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, AI, blockchain, and Internet of Things undoubtedly offer a transformative potential for the augmentation and potential replacement of human tasks and activities within a wide range of industrial, intellectual, and social applications. The pace of change for this new AI technological age is staggering, with new breakthroughs in algorithmic machine learning and autonomous decision making, coupled with developments related to blockchain and IoT, engendering new opportunities for continued innovation. The impact of AI and other emerging technologies could be significant, with industries and sectors ranging from agriculture, finance, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, supply chain, logistics, and utilities, all potentially being disrupted by the onset of these technologies. This seminar series on the digital future for business and society, emerging perspectives on AI, blockchain, and IoT, will present various perspectives from a number of leading expert speakers. Today, we have one such expert speaker with us, Professor Keng Siau, who is the head for the Department of Information Systems, City University of Hong Kong. Professor Keng is the HOD, as I told you, at the City University of Hong Kong. Prior to joining CityU, he was the head of business programs at the Missouri University of Science and Technology. Professor Siau received his PhD in business administration with a specialization in management information systems from the University of British Columbia in 1996. His MS and BS honors degrees are in computer and information sciences from the National University of Singapore. Professor Siau has more than 300 academic publications. According to Google Scholar, he's got a citation count of more than 16,000. His H-index and I-10 index, according to Google Scholar, are 65 and 160 respectively. Professor Siau is consistently ranked as one of the top information system researchers in the world based on his H-index productivity rate. His research has been funded by NSF, IBM, and other IT organizations. Professor Siau, may I now please request you to please take over the session and proceed with your talk.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Santosh, for the very nice introduction. I do not claim to be an expert in AI, but AI has something that really interests me. So I did some work on that with my students. Most of them are from the Missouri University of Science and Technology. I just moved to Hong Kong probably 4 months ago, almost 4 months, just after 4 months. Right, I arrived here on June the 18th. As I was telling some of my colleagues here, is that the main reason for me to move is because our parents, my wife and my parents are in Singapore. So Hong Kong is easier to commute to Singapore. But then the pandemic, we are still trapped in Hong Kong because of the strict quarantine. Yeah, we cannot travel. Once you travel, you come back, we have to stay about 3 weeks in hotel. And one of my colleagues, another Singaporean, that's at City University of Hong Kong, So last year he was in hotel for 100 over days because he traveled a lot to Singapore. Every time he comes back, he had to stay in hotel. So 1/3 of his last year was in hotel, and that's really not too much of not too interesting. All right, so thank you very much for the nice introduction and allowing me to speak on this topic on values of ethical AI. Right, so my co-author and I would like to hear some advice, some comments, and some suggestions on how we can improve this paper. Maybe I can switch to presentation mode so that'll be easier for you guys to see. Can you guys see that? I hope I'm not destroying anything. You guys can see that?
Yes, sir. It is.
Okay. Okay, that's good. So we look at the values of AI. So AI has basically captured the world's attention, at least for a while, and is still having some interesting ways around this AI. So like this, the past Stephen Hawking was saying that AI might capture the world, replace humans altogether. Okay, so we are also at the most dangerous moment in the development of humanity. Okay, the rise of AI is likely to extend job destruction deep into the middle class, and with only the most caring, creative, and supervisory roles remaining. Now, of course, Elon Musk, SpaceX, Tesla, so he also concerned about AI. He said the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads, and by a lot. Okay, so we have some of the famous people, scientists, and probably people in the industry. They are fairly well aware of the potential of AI. They're sounding the alarm. So what is this thing about AI, and what are the values of ethical AI? And we will look at it in this presentation. So we'll first look at the literature review on the AI. Then we look at the conceptual foundation on ethics. We use one research methodology called the value focused thinking, and I'll discuss a bit more about that. And then we will discuss about the research finding from this study, and we can talk about the discussion, the contribution, and what can we learn from this study and how we can move forward. So the term AI was started around 1956, right? So at a conference, they founded this term called AI. And AI, we can basically look into it from two perspectives. One is a weak AI, or artificial narrow intelligence, or we call ANI, or narrow AI. And the other one is a strong AI, or artificial general intelligence. Okay, so that one has the intellectual capability that's more or less equal to that of human. So most of the AI systems that you encounter so far are should be under this thing called a weak AI, right? So like your driverless car, you can only drive a car, you cannot do translation. Your translation, Google Translate, all this is also for one specific narrow area. So you cannot drive a car. Okay, so they are on a narrow area, so limited to a specific or narrow area. We are still waiting for this thing called the strong AI, or artificial general intelligence. Now, will that one eventually appear? We are not sure. Most people think that 50-50. Some people say that it will happen. Some people say it may not happen. But there's also a possibility that it will happen. So that's why we are concerned about that. Now, once we hit this thing called the strong AI, we go into this thing called the singularity. Now, there's a point in time where the growth, the technological growth of this AI becomes uncontrollable and irreversible. It's going to become so good, so fast, that we will may have a negative consequences on the human civilization. So that's something that we are concerned about. And that's what most of the time what people are talking about when they talk about the danger of AI. They are really talking about this thing called singularity, when the growth becomes uncontrollable and we humans are controlled by the artificial intelligence. When we talk about weak AI, most of the time, the danger is not so much there for humanity, but the danger is there for job destruction. Okay, the future of job, okay, is potentially a problem when we have all this AI that's doing a lot of manual work that people are doing at this point in time. So AI can bring positive effects to the economies, to politics, and to humanity if you do it nicely, okay, with considerable and thoughtful care. The risk of AI can be avoided most of the time, what some people argue, and producing tremendous values and benefits with minimal risk. One thing that people has been talking about for some time now is the governance, the policies, and the regulations. You want to be able to manage to control the growth of this thing called AI. Okay, the future development of AI, very important. You want to properly manage it to control it. So you look at some of the work that's been done in this area. Okay, people look at AI to achieve sustainable development goal, AI and machine learning, the application of it, gender differences and biases. So that's also one of the key areas. Okay, how can we reduce biases in AI? Okay, we can look at it from different perspectives, from the human resource perspective, from a healthcare perspective, and from other perspectives as well. Need for a system view to regulate. Okay, we need to have something to regulate and manage the growth of AI and machine learning. AI and healthcare, okay, that's also one area that can potentially develop tremendous value for the human being. So most of us are researchers. There are so much research work being produced. We simply do not have the time to read all the literature. If AI can actually read most of the literature and can combine enough knowledge together, maybe they can solve a lot of problems that we have at this point in time, the pandemic, the cancer treatment, etc. Okay, so maybe the solution is already there, but nobody managed to combine all the pieces together. So if something like an entity like AI can do that, that will be of tremendous value to human. Eye tracking and AI to enhance motivation and learning, or AI learning, or AI in classroom. That's also receiving a lot of attention. How can AI transform higher education? How AI can do positive impact to society, healthcare, ethical issues, and how to combine AI with big data. And one thing I always tell my students, you can look at AI and cybersecurity and big data. If you have knowledge in all three, and you can combine them, that will be excellent. Okay, you will have an excellent job prospect. So we look at ethics. What's ethics? Ethics basically moral ways restricting the behavior or actions of a person or a group. Okay, so there's some moral compass, okay, to guide the behavior of a person or a group. We also want to have this autonomous system like AI to take ethical and moral principles into consideration. Of course, we have seen that in movies like iRobots, etc., about what are the principles, some of the 4 key principles or 3 key principles of AI. So we want to make sure that the AI will not end up harming a human and will do good. Okay, and AI also must do good on the aspect of respect and ensure privacy and equity. Okay, that's also been discussed a lot of time, how we can ensure equity, promoting gender, racial equity, and also maybe privacy of data. So ethics is actually a big challenge posed by AI. Okay, we need to resolve this issue of ethics. So it's wise and crucial, not just to ensure that the system developed, the AI system, is ethical. We also must train people in ethical reasoning, especially those people that are designing and implementing this kind of expert systems or AI solutions. They must know what is ethical design and what are the ethical principles so that they can ensure that the final products, the outcome, will behave ethically. So there are some researchers that will list some of the ethical principles. For example, Jobin listed 6 of them: transparencies, justice, fairness, okay, not to do evil or harm to humans, responsibility, and privacy. So we also have articles that look at the ethics and AI. So for example, the leadership and relationship between ethics and effectiveness. Okay, a lot of people look at that. biases and trustworthiness in ethical AI, okay, ethics of AI in healthcare, information privacy and impact assessment, okay, about AI, knowledge helps with responsible regulation and use of AI, the key factors to design AI for social good, ethics in the era of AI, transparency in AI, ethical principle for the application of AI, virtue as a framework for the design and use of AI. So there are a number of researchers, especially articles in this area that's coming out, that's looking at ethics and ethical AI. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a very important area. So the objective of this research is to identify the values, the benefits, the concerns, okay, that are important in the decision-making process of ethical AI. So the values is not just financial values. So when we look at the value-focused thinking, we are looking at the benefits, the concerns, the decision-making variables, factors that are important to that particular case. So in this case, ethical AI. So the benefits, concern, etc., related to ethical AI. So we want to derive a means-ends objective network, and that's the output of this value-focused thinking. At the end of it, we will derive a means-ends objective network, and I'll show you that means-end objective network later on. And we want to support a framework for achieving ethical AI and pave the way for future research. So we look at the ethics. So there are a few conceptual foundation. One is the utilitarian ethics. So it attaches the importance to the greatest good for the greatest number of people or human being at this point in time. And we have the deontological ethics. The concern is human beings should be treated with dignity and respect because humans have rights. Okay, so they should be treated with respect and with dignity. And then this thing called the virtue ethics. Okay, emphasize on what makes a good person. Okay, so these are some of the general ethical theories. In the area of business, we also have this thing called the normative theories related to ethics. So how should business behave? So one is what we call the shareholder theory. So basically the shareholder theory says that you should improve the profits and maximize the shareholder values. It's a social responsibility of the business. The next one that's evolved from this shareholder theory is a stakeholder theory. Not just the shareholder, not just the people who invest money in the company, but you must also look into the, let's say, the stakeholder, like for example, the employees, the customers, the governments, the communities, the suppliers, etc. And then we have this social construct theory. So basically it says that business ethics that places responsibility on the corporate manager to consider the needs of the societies. So if you operate, let's say, for example, a business operate out of London, you have to take into account what is good for London, okay, the needs of the society. So you can see that a lot of companies that, for example, they are based in London or New York, they will do regular contribution, they will do some social good for the community. So that's related to this social construct theory or contract theory, social contract theory. So in this particular study, we use this research methodology called value-focused thinking. So this has been proposed by Ralph Keeney around 1992. I think he's now at the University of Southern California. He published this probably as a book by the Harvard Business Press. So we basically identify the values and finding out what is important and how to achieve them from interviewing subjects. So it's a very systematic way of doing interviews. So it's a qualitative approach, but it's a very systematic qualitative approach. That's what I like about this methodology. And then it has it helps us to derive means-end objective network at the end. So in a way, it's sort of IS, we call that somewhat of a theory building. So in this value-focused thinking, the value refers to the principles, Okay, the principles for evaluating the desirability of possible alternatives of consequences. So, for example, what are the concerns? What are the potential solutions, possible alternatives? So these are what we call values. So values of concern are made explicit by the identification of objectives. So we will derive the means objectives and the fundamental objectives after interviewing the subjects. And I'll show you the process in the next, probably next slide or the slide after this. So the objective can be expressed in a common form. So it's a statement. Each objective is a statement of something that one desires to achieve. I want to achieve this one. So an objective has three features. It has a decision context, it has an object, it has a direction of preference. So A will lead to B. So the means will lead to the, for example, the fundamental objective. And in this value-focused thinking, there are two types of objectives. One is the means objectives, and one is the fundamental objectives. Okay. So this value-focused thinking has been used in quite a few research work, including some of mine and my co-authors. So, for example, it's been used to identify the decision opportunities and creating alternatives. It has been used in identifying, let's say, creativity in decision making with value-focused thinking. We look at it the VFT, value-focused thinking, on the strategic implication of mobile technology. That was about maybe almost 20 years ago. Okay, understanding the values of mobile technology in education. Okay, that's about 12 years ago. And then people look at it from the role of value-focused thinking, idea management. Okay, understanding the organizational safety using value-focused thinking. Application of value-focused thinking on the environmental selection of wall structures. So it's probably related to architecture. Okay, VFT assessment on information system security. Gurpreet and his co-author did some work on that using value-focused thinking to look at some security features. Structuring objective based on VFT methodology and using VFT to select innovative force protection ideas. So it's been used in multiple different contexts. Okay, basically helps to define the decision-making process. Okay. What are the factors that are important? So you look at the value-focused thinking approach. So we set out first for our study, we look at the ethical AI. So we use a value-focused thinking approach. We set up the goal that this research is trying to achieve. We then prepare the question list and we conduct interviews to collect the data. We analyze the transcripts and find the logical relationship between the objectives. And then we construct the means and objective network in accordance with the objectives. So it's a very systematic, qualitative approach. And in a way, you can look at it as we are, in a way, doing some theory building. Because the means and objective network at the end can serve as the foundation, theoretical foundation for future study and future research. So in our study for this case, ethical AI, we interviewed 50 subjects. So 27 of them are students, 12 of them are faculty and staff, and 11 of them are community members. And we do audio recording. So we have all the interview recorded. Each interview takes about 30 to 45 minutes. Okay, and I'll tell you more details in the following slides. So for the data collection and analysis, we have some prompting questions. So we try to get the subjects to tell us, okay, what are important to them, what are the benefits of ethical AI, and what's important in this ethical AI. So some of the prompting question will be like, what are the benefits of ethical AI? Why are they important? And how can we achieve these objectives? And what problems or concerns can arise in ethical AI? So if there's no limitation at all, it's a wish list. So what are the features or functions of ethical AI you wish to have? So these are the prompting question. So we use this to prompt the subjects, the interviewees, so they can tell us more about what they believe an ethical AI should be. So the 50 subjects were interviewed using the value-focused thinking. The sample size, like any qualitative or most of the qualitative research, we determine the sample size based on the point of saturation. That means that if we conduct additional interviews, we did not produce additional data or valuable data, then we can say more or less we reach the point of saturation. So basically, for this, let's say this grounded theory, Glaser and Strauss, they say that we cannot state at the outset of the research how many subjects we will sample during the entire study. We can only count up the subjects at the end, once we hit the point of saturation. And what's the usual sample size for qualitative research? Like Felix Tan and Hunter, they did a repertory grid, I believe, okay, and they use about 10 to 15 subjects. And to them, that's more than enough for them to elicit a comprehensive list of constructs. So in the general guideline for grounded theory, about maybe 20 to 30 subjects. And in our case, we went up to 50 subjects. We want to make sure that we don't miss out anything. And also we try to get the subjects from different groups. Some are students, some are faculty members who are more familiar with AI and the future of AI, and some are in the community, industry people that are looking into these AI solutions or AI development. So we try to get samples or the subjects from different groups. So we went up to about 50 subjects. So how can we validate that the reliability and accuracy of our, let's say, network, means and objective network, which I'm going to show you later on. So the subjects, I will review the objective after each interview. So we will try to list down the objective, and then we will show it to the subjects. Is that what you say? Is that what you actually meant? Okay, so we ask the subjects to review that after each interview. We adopted the standard stopping rule. That's the point of saturation for data collection. And after we constructed the means-ends objective network, we actually went back to more than half the subjects and say, look at this means-end objective network. Tell us whether this is accurate. Okay, is there anything missing? Is there anything that's misrepresented? So we went back to more than 50 subjects, more than half the subjects. So probably about, I can't remember the actual number, probably about 28, 29 subjects. So more than half. We have a total of 50 subjects. We went back to more than half of them. So this is the means-end objective network that we constructed based on our study. So you can see from easier to see from the right-hand side. So from the right-hand side, the column, we have 8 of them. We have 8 fundamental objectives. So the research objective, the main one, is to maximize ethics of AI. And there are 8 fundamental objectives that were derived from this study. So for example, to minimize job loss, to minimize social inequality, to maximize the control and design of AI, to maximize security and safety, to minimize AI biases, which is a very important topic now, especially for, let's say, human resources and the application of AI and machine learning based on past data, because historical data may have biases. So how to minimize the AI biases, how to maximize trust in AI. We want to be able to trust the AI solution, how to maximize the welfare of humanity. We definitely do not want the AI to eventually harm the humanity. So how can we maximize the welfare of humanity and minimize the impact on family and social life? We want AI to help us to make our life easier, more happier life, peaceful life, rather than impact on our family and social life. And how do we achieve all these fundamental objectives? The 8 of them that's on the right-hand side. So we have 2 columns. We group the means objective into 2 columns. So for example, to achieve this minimize job loss, for example, one of the means objective is to maximize new job creation. You want to create more jobs, okay, with AI, not so that you minimize the job loss. So these are the means objective, the two columns, the left column and the middle column. So how do you maximize new job creation? Okay, one of the ways to do that, maximize technology innovation. Okay, then you can maximize new job creation. So this maximize technology innovation, this means objective lead to another means objective. That's a maximize new job creation. And this lead to the fundamental objective. That's a minimize job loss. So some of the means objective, maybe I can quickly run through some of them, like minimize misuse of AI, maximize precision and accuracy, that's important. You want to maximize productivity. Of course, transparency is important, especially you want to have, let's say, for example, trust in AI. You need to make the AI system more transparent and not a black box. Okay, so that's important. Maximize transparency, maximize efficiency, maximize developers' accountability on AI, maximize human involvement in ethical decision making. We want the AI to behave ethically. So sometimes humans need to be involved in some of the decision making process. Maximize convenience of humanity. So that will lead to the maximized welfare of humanity. Individual privacy, that's important. We do not want to sacrifice our privacy. Minimize human exposure to dangerous situation. For example, we wrote a paper on AI in mining industry. So in mining industry, underground, and sometimes you have hazardous gas or explosive material. These are areas where robots and AI can do a lot of good, okay, to minimize the danger to human. And to achieve some of this means objective, we have another one on the left-hand side, the leftmost column. Okay, maximize technology innovation, maximize AI learning and algorithm, develop law, regulation, rules, and standard on ethical AI. How should people behave in terms of developing AI? Okay, what is possible and what is lawful and what is should not be touched. So one example would be cloning. For example, taking move away a bit from the AI context, cloning. We can clone a human now, no problem. The technology is there, but the law says that you cannot clone a human. Okay, so we need some of this law, regulation, and rules to guide the behavior of the developers or the researcher. Explainable AI. I just moved from the US to Hong Kong. One of the main area that the NSF, National Science Foundation in US, is trying to explore is to make the AI explainable. Okay, AI shouldn't be a black box. You should not put in inputs and then you get the output. They must be able to explain, okay, I derive at this output because of all these things. Right, so the AI should be able to explain itself. So that will enhance the transparency. And as we mentioned earlier, not only we want to ensure that the AI is ethical, but the developers and the programmers are aware of ethics, because these are the people who will design and develop the AI systems. And maximize the government and associations oversight on AI development. And then I think this is very critical. The government need to say, okay, we are not going to, let's say, clone human. Okay, that's an example that people say, no, we cannot do that. So we should also have the government to say that, well, AI should not eventually be able to kill human. Although this is a very controversial topic. We know that a lot of AI development in the military area, they are made to kill people, right? Because they are in the military area. Okay, so one of the big development in AI is in the military use of AI. And that is something that people are concerned about. Maximize human-centered design. Okay, it should actually benefit individuals, benefit human. So let me move on. So these are some of the fundamental objectives that I mentioned just now. And these are some of the evidence that we collected from the interviews. So for example, minimize job loss, ethical AI can create more new jobs with improvement in education. Okay, minimize social inequality, interests and benefits can be equally balanced and guaranteed by ethical AI. Control and design. AI development should be controlled and managed, maximize the safety and security. The ethical AI can protect users' information without misusing, giving comfort to users, and minimize AI biases. Unbiased AI will make it more acceptable. Very important. Maximize trust in AI. Humanity can depend on ethical AI without worries about AI or concerns about AI. Maximize the welfare of humanity. Okay, well-being of humanity can be improved, including, for example, caring for the seniors, aging people, mental health. So that's an important thing, welfare and well-being of humanity. Minimize the impact on family and social life. Okay, make the world a better place to live and work for humans. So that's very important. So these are some of the evidence and some of the comments provided by the interviewees. Okay, and these are evidence to support the fundamental objectives. We also have evidence for supporting the means objective. So let me just mention one or two, like maximize explainable AI. So the ethical AI can make the procedure open and explicit, avoiding the black box. Okay, AI must be able to explain itself, how it uses the inputs to come up with the outcome or the recommended solutions. And the last one, maximize oversight on AI development. Okay, evidence from the interviews, from the interviewee. Governments make full use of regulations to monitor and use their power to manage the development of AI. So these are very important for the continuing development of AI and to avoid the those Terminator scenario that we see in cinema and on movies. So other examples of mean objectives. So let me pick. Okay, maximize human privacy at one second from the bottom. Okay, information can be kept private by ethical AI. Okay, let me move on. I don't think I want to go through each of them. Okay. So these are basically evidence from the interviews, what we collected from the interviewees. So let me discuss some of the things that we have observed from this study. So from the value-focused thinking study, we identified the following values, okay, the benefits, the concerns, okay, maybe some of the potential alternatives and solutions of ethical AI. So for example, we want to avoid job loss, we want to avoid inequality, we want to control the development of AI, security and safety are important. We do not want AI to be biased, so AI biases need to be corrected, especially you use past data for machine learning. We need to trust in AI. We want to have welfare of humanity and improve our family and social life. So we also noticed from the subjects that we interviewed that they are not really against AI. Okay, they are not against AI per se. And also some of the subjects, we did this study about 2 years ago, 2-3 years ago. I think it's probably at the beginning of the pandemic. So the subjects, some of them are not fully aware or have full understanding of the future implication of AI. And a lot of their perception or conception actually comes from sci-fi books and movies, like Terminator, iRobot. Okay, all these have impacted the subject's perception of AI. So all these movies and sci-fi books have huge impact. Most of them recognize that AI has great potential, but it comes with great risk as well. Okay? And a few subjects mentioned that we need to have regulation, laws, ethical policies to quickly establish and to guide the development and continuing research on AI. And this is one thing that I think probably 2 years ago, okay, so a few thousand leading AI researchers signed a pledge against killer robots. Okay, so they do not want robots to be used as a weapon against humans. But of course, we know that intuitively, we know that this is happening everywhere. Okay, military spending on AI a lot of times on those driverless drone, driverless tanks, soldierless submarines, so that human life can be safe. But all these pilotless drones or fighter jets or submarines, they are meant to kill the enemies, and these enemies are humans as well. So if you look at the research contribution, so the theoretical contribution, we use a very systematic approach, the value-focused thinking, to identify a comprehensive list of ethical AI values. Okay. So the means-ends objective network can actually serve as a conceptual model to guide future research in this area. Practical contributions. So the means-ends objective network highlights issues of concern to humans. Okay, for example, they want to make sure that the welfare is taken care of and the privacy is not compromised. Okay, so what are the important issues or concerns to the interviewees and also maybe to humanity in general? Analyze and present ways to minimize resistance and enhance humanity's well-being. You want to market and you want to promote AI solutions. We need to find a way to, in IS, we look at adoption, okay, to minimize resistance and enhance humanity's well-being will be one way to minimize the resistance to AI. This means and objective network and the result of this study is also valuable to AI strategies and policies formulation. Okay, very important, especially if you look at it from maybe the regulation, the legal aspect. That's very important. We want to look at ethical AI and how the legally and in terms of ethically, we can enforce that, or we can at least try to reduce the unethical AI. So we use a systematic qualitative approach, value-focused thinking, to identify a comprehensive list of values. So we identified 8 fundamental objectives and 18 means objectives that are critical to the development of ethical AI. So this means-ends objective network present a roadmap, okay, for people to, for a researcher, for practitioner, to obtain values from ethical AI. And the research results are useful to academics and practitioners as well as policymakers to ensure the ethical AI development. So we want the future of this AI to be one that's on the left, where human and AI or machine and robots can work together for the benefit of humanity. We do not want those Terminator scenarios to be our future. Okay, that's something to be completely avoided as much as possible. So that's my presentation, around 40 minutes, just nice. So I think we can have some discussion, and if you have any feedback, suggestions, we'd love to hear that, because we are still finalizing and developing and enhancing the paper for submission. So let me stop share so that I can move back and see you guys. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Siau. Thank you for your wonderful talk. Yogesh sir, may I invite you if you have any thoughts you can first share, and then we'll go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, very, very interesting talk, Keng. And I think this is the biggest problem in AI domain. How to actually keep AI responsible, make AI responsible and keep it responsible. You know, although you mentioned thousands of scientists signed a pledge not to create killer robot, but we already know that drones being used to target particular person or particular place. So this is already happening, and it may go to really any scale in next few years. But so obviously you pointed number of value values for AI developments. I just wonder who should guide and how this whole development process should be guided. I know it's not remit of your research, but do you have any thought at international level, at national level, how these things should be guided? Because anyone doing anything at the moment. So, people are just developing. There is no governance, there is no control.
Right.
In the process. Yeah.
I think that's a very good questions. I've been thinking about this for some time. So I started looking into this ethical AI issues probably 3-4 years ago. And the one thing is that a lot of policymakers are not familiar with AI. Some are not even familiar with technology. So that's something of a big concern. So one time in the US, we were just joking. So some of these Congress people, they are not familiar with technology at all. What's the possibility of AI? We should all put them into one driverless bus and drive them around Washington, DC on a driverless bus, so they understand what kind of technology is out there, what is possible. So I think it is something that probably not just individual country can resolve. We need to have a worldwide effort. So let's say if one country A is developing a pilotless drone as a military weapon, of course country B will develop the same thing, right? Just not to be at a disadvantage. So we need to have a worldwide effort to say, no, let's stop doing that. Just like cloning human. If country A is cloning human and nobody stopped that, country B will do that, the same thing. And all these clones can actually maybe work in the factories or be soldiers. Okay, so we need to have worldwide effort. Everybody say, no, we all agree not to do that. Okay, and then there's some way we can check on that. This should be a worldwide effort because it concerns humanity. Individual countries is hard to do that.
I agree that it has to be global effort. The nature needs to be international. It would not be okay. I mean, none of the country going to stop their innovation and other things,
right,
in expense of others. But what role we should play and how we should play that role to influencing policymakers, because it's very important. We are one who is actually driving, computer scientists driving it, the development. So how academics can actually influence these policymakers? I know I wouldn't ask too many questions, but this is just getting your thoughts about this issue. Yeah.
Right. I think they are probably the policymakers, or these are slowly realizing the potential of AI. Of course, some people just say that, telling the policymaker, strong AI will never happen. Singularity is basically a science fiction. Don't worry about that. Right. So, it may be true, but it may not be true. But even for weak AI, future of work, okay, how are we going to take care of those people whose jobs are being replaced by robots? That's also important. Right. So those are important jobs that are important to humanity as well. So they have this term called the useless class. I think it was coined by this researcher from Israel. So he said this is not unemployment. This is a useless class. Not that they are useless class because they will never get a job. Okay, because of their skill set. Okay, they will never get a job. They are useless. Okay, so you're going to create this useless class of people, and how are we going to take care of that? And we discuss about universal income, universal basic income. Right, that probably will support them, and make them at least have a roof over the head and something to eat every day. And we saw this movie, Ready Player One. Okay, you may not find fulfillment in life because you are somewhat your skill set is not useful in the society. So maybe you should find, and actually some people recommended that you can just Google, well, how do people live in the future? You may have to find fulfillment in computer games. You can be a superhero in the computer games, although you are quite useless in the real life, but you need to have self-fulfillment. So you can be a superhero in a computer game. Okay. So these are all interesting discussion. But I think what we are more concerned about is the strong AI that will really have a impact on the future of humanity. So future of work, we can try to do training, reskilling, retraining, but we also have to recognize that a group of people will not be able to follow. Okay, a group of people will not be able to follow. Okay, so of course, some people say that this is no different from the Industrial Revolution. Okay, in the past, we have a steam engine, we have electricity, we move farmers from the farm to factories. They do better, but those are labor work. Those are labor work. Now we are talking about cognitive work. Okay, how you process information, how you can let's say write programs. So labor work is quite different from cognitive work. So some people may not be able to successfully reskill, retrain to be able to adapt to this age where you have robots and AI everywhere. And of course, once you hit the strong AI and singularity, there'll be a totally different thing. And we are not, most of the time, we're not talking about that at this point in time. We're just talking about future of work, how the humanity can be affected, and we try to avoid those problems caused by strong AI and singularity. Yeah. And this is really computer scientists. We have to say this all the time, especially to policymakers. I think there's more and more discussion with policymakers. I know the presidents, like US president, they always meet the industry leaders and talk about the future of AI, especially during the Obama time, at the end of his presidency. I think there were 2 reports came out looking at future of work and future impact of AI. Okay, there was a huge report from Washington, DC, at least championed by the White House. Okay, so I think the policymaker needs to be aware of that. And as a computer scientist, of course, we know that people have a pledge not to develop killers robots, but as you correctly mentioned, almost a lot of people are doing that. Okay, almost every country is trying to experiment on that and trying to get an advantage. Yeah. So worldwide effort may be useful at this point in time. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Siau. Raman sir, may I request you to share your thoughts on this, because you are an IT expert yourself. I want to know from you as well.
I'm not an expert per se. Yeah, I'm also in the field of information system. It was a very good talk. Thanks for giving your time. I think it should be already 9 o'clock at your place at Hong Kong.
Yeah, almost 9.
Yeah, so I completely agree with a lot of aspects, but there are some places where I feel it should be localized. You know, if you take, for example, India, you know, finding the gender while a lady is in her family way is a criminal offense here in India. While this is not a problem if you're staying in the UK, you have the option to find the gender of the baby. Because of the local conditions here in India, this is different. Similarly, to talk about AI, I think there are places where things might also change locally, norms and the policy making, and at a global level, that might be a different thing altogether. But yeah, sometimes it's scary, you know, when you start talking at home about, say, renting an apartment, the next day you find at least 5 emails in your mailbox which talks about rental apartments at different locations. And you might be wondering that, I mean, I didn't even give a search for it, but the phone is listening to what you speak. So we are already in that time and age. So in fact, stringent policy measures, I think some of them are pulling up the big IT giants for several of their monopolistic kind of rules, regulations that they have brought in. But yes, sooner the faster with respect to policy making, with respect to awareness for people. Otherwise, people might not know. They say, I'm not a VIP. How does it matter if my data is being taken by some big MNC sitting there in the US? I don't have a problem. But this attitude also has to change. I mean, there is a lot to be done. These are a couple of comments, I would say, not questions, to whatever you have spoken. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful talk, I think.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
A lot of value. And thanks, Professor Yogesh, for making this happen. You are the co-host partners with Symbiosis for all your support and connects, which is making this happen.
I just wanted to say that what you just mentioned, Ramanji, that, sometimes you write something in Gmail and you, even after just 5 minutes, you see on Facebook ad about it or something related to it. how that is happening. I mean, it's not the same platform, it's not the same company, but still you see the message. Sometimes, as you said, that you just simply talk and nothing, you have not written anywhere anything, and you see after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, that there is something directly related to it. And this is basically scary. And at the same time, I mean, algorithm have been already misused, basically. So you look at the companies, and I recently saw somewhere someone tweeted, and they gave example of the Uber taxi, that the pricing for one who never take from that place to a particular destination, and the pricing for the person who always take from there. This pricing was much higher for this person who always take a taxi from one destination to other than the one who never takes, or who only takes once, and at same time booking. Now, this actually very, very scary thing, that it actually algorithm being used already to exploit people, and take advantage of their situation, their need. And this is happening everywhere. You see flight, you see, hotel, you see anything. You search once on your computer, don't book it, you're probably getting the cheaper price at that time. When you come back after a day or two, you're definitely not going to get that price. You're definitely going to get higher pricing, because they know that you need it. So the algorithm has already started being used in the way it should not be used. And I think that the regulations there should be regulation about it. It's just not getting in right direction. Already you can see it. Forget the killer robot, forget those things. The things that actually impacting our everyday life is really important. As Professor Raman said, that obviously these algorithms can predict many things, but certain things may not be appropriate. For example, gender prediction in Indian context. Likewise, many other things in different other countries. So how to stop this? Obviously, these are the big questions. We can't answer it, but we definitely can pose these questions to right platform, to right places, through media, through other means. These things need to be discussed, actually. So anyway, sorry,
question on the chat window, I think.
Yes,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So there is a question by Yi Ding. Hi, Professor Siau. It's great talk. Many thanks and learned a lot. Do you think there are different ethical requirements for AI across different industries? If so, can such variation be incorporated in theory building?
So that's a very good question. So I think we can definitely have eventually have different theories for different different countries and different regions and different industry, taking into, for example, different regions, taking into account the cultural differences and maybe the social context. Okay, like Professor Raman was talking about in India, you cannot try to determine the gender of the baby because probably trying to prevent abortion, right? I think that's not good, right? So different countries and different industry will have probably different ethical issues that needs to be addressed. Okay, they are more specific. So we definitely can do that. So you can develop theory, just try to get those subjects from that particular area. Then you can actually look at it and see how that industry differ from other industry. You also can look at it from different countries. Then you can have regional differences or country cultural differences. You can even actually look at it from a longitudinal perspective. At this point in time, AI is fairly new. People may not be too aware of that. How about 5 years later? How about 10 years later? Will the issues differ? Will their concern differ over time or evolve over time? So those are very interesting questions. I think the ethical standards will definitely evolve over time, right? In the past, we have probably not much issue killing a dog or a cat. People will probably just won't care much about it. If you try to kill a dog or a cat on the street now, people will probably hit you. So the ethical standard has differed, right? People now are more protective about all this cruelty, and you should not be cruel to animals, right? So the ethical principle will evolve over time, and we have to be aware of that, and we should try to look at it as an evolving thing. Yeah. So like I mentioned about the business ethical thing. So we start out with probably at the beginning of business, we look at shareholder. And then people say, not just shareholder, you also need to be concerned about employees and customers. So you talk about stakeholders. And now people are saying, no, not just the employee and the customers that are related to your business, but you're operating in this particular region, in London. You have to care about London as a whole. Yeah, so the ethical principle has evolved over time. So that's a very good question. Thank you.
Just to add to it, Keng, obviously, as per different industry, different ethical element may be more or less important. For example, transparency. Transparency might be very, very important in the finance, in the legal sector, where the decision need to be explained to the person. If something happens, if 200,000 people affected by a decision, or even few people affected by a decision, how that decision has been made. So that is more important there. For example, in contrast, in medicine or healthcare, you want more precision rather than explainability. So the precision need to be there. If little bit, error happens, then person is dead. So the precision is more important than transparency there. And therefore, this dimension can vary, in different contexts. And you can take same thing, some industry more prone to bias than other industries, right? So bias, you want to look at in that way. So I think people, obviously, you cannot apply same thing very homogeneously everywhere. It has to be very thoughtful process, basically. That's how you want to say.
That's a very good point. Yes, I think different industry will have different requirements. Sometimes maybe even from government regulation, you are required to report all these things. So you have to do this. This is part of your ethical principle, ethical standard that you need to abide with. So these are important. One thing also we sort of discussed the other time is that in one of our paper, we say that eventually, as we look into the future, if the robots has so nowadays when we talk about ethics, we say that the robot shouldn't harm human. We didn't see any ethical principle that say robot shouldn't harm another robot. So in the future, when the robot has some self-awareness, maybe the robot should be a nice robot as well and not go around and kick other robots, right? So that kind of principle will evolve over time. Yeah, we do expect this is an interesting area. Yeah, so it's a continuously evolving area. Yogesh?
There is another angle of ethics as well, actually, which we are thinking less, but some people actually raising. So at the moment, we are looking at how AI can negatively affect human. So look at that. We need to be careful of ethics in that regard. But there are people also saying that, well, even human, how human will treat AI. There is an ethical angle there as well, because you are humanified. We are humanifying the robots. We are using them as a companion. We are using them as a personal care. So how human treat AI, that is also, the ethics is also involved there, actually. So I guess this discussion will happen later on, but some people have already started talking about it. Yeah.
Right. So that reminds me of a video. This passerby was kicking at this robot that was transporting food on the street. It's a robot. He probably doesn't like the robot. Just kick the robot. Come on. There's some I think it's some kind of cultural development. Okay, personal development inside there. Okay? You don't go around kick the robot, although the robot may not understand anything, may not feel pain, but it's not a good behavior.
Thank you very much, Yogesh sir. Thank you very much, Professor Siau. I have received another question by Dr. Madhura Bedarkar, and this is on based on your talk. And she says, can value-focused thinking be used as a research method in entrepreneurship research, or is it suitable only wherever ethical issues are there?
No. I think the value-focused thinking can be used in a lot of different contexts. It's a systematic, qualitative approach. So you need to know whether your research question fit this particular methodology, or this methodology can be used to address your research question. So in the end of it, you get this means and objective network. If that's not something that you think is helpful in your research, yes. For example, the entrepreneurship. Okay, what are the maybe ethical principle of entrepreneurs, or even how can entrepreneurs make decision-making process? Okay, what are the consideration? Yeah, you can use this value-focused thinking approach to do that. It's not just related to ethics. And I think I also mentioned about a few works that we did before. We use it to start look at the mobile technology, the strategic implication of mobile technology, the strategic use of mobile technology. So it's a fairly generic approach.
Thank you, Professor Siau. She also has a request asking if the paper that you have, that you're discussing, has that been published? And if yes, can we have access to it?
Unfortunately, not yet. I just has been swamped with all the admin work, yeah, both in the US and in Hong Kong. So I'll get it published as soon as possible so that I can pass the paper to you.
Absolutely, yeah. Sir. It'll be a pleasure to read it. Thank you. And we also have another question by Professor Roba Abbas. Professor Roba, thank you very much for your question as well. Your session is coming up almost a month from now. That is on 17th of November. And Professor Roba has a question for you, Professor Keng. Thank you for your great presentation. Professor Siau, your value-focused thinking study has highlighted significant values of ethical AI. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts on next steps in your research. Specifically, how will the means-ends objective network be implemented in practice to contribute towards the vision of ethical AI? Thank you.
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. So thank you. Actually, the first research grant that I received in Hong Kong, probably 2 weeks ago, is using this value-focused thinking to study ethical AI in the legal profession, lawyers. Okay, how they can actually formulate regulations, policies that can guide the development of AI. So that's something that I'll be doing. And one thing that I'd like to do, as I mentioned earlier, is to look at these ethical principles as it evolve over time related to AI. Yeah, so you can look at it maybe 3 years down the road, and then another 5 years down the road, and how it changes as people get more and more familiar with AI and see more and more AI. Now you go to warehouses, the robots are everywhere. A lot of robots are implemented in the warehouses. So if you look at, if you talk to the workers, they probably have, well, they may have some feeling about their job being taken away by robots. Yeah, but will that eventually benefit them in the future? Maybe. So we can look at it over time and also look at it from a different perspective. I would really like to talk to some of those military commanders and those scientists that's doing all this research for the government. Hey, what do you guys think? You are developing all this sailorless submarine, pilotless drones. Do you think that's a good thing to do? Now, what about the ethical principle behind that? Yeah, they are going to be used against human. Maybe they are enemies, but they are still humans, right? So is that something that is, yeah, something I would like to know from their perspective? Okay, how do they think about all this? Yeah, it's just like I think in the past, after they developed the nuclear weapon to end the World War II against Japan, they also talked to some of the scientists, right? You know, what do you think about developing this nuclear weapon that was used to in one way stop the war, but in another way also to harm a lot of human beings? So these are all interesting stuff. So we can take a look at that. We try to be not political. We're just doing research. We try not to be involved in political decision making or becoming political. We just look at it from a research point of view.
Thank you, Professor Siau. We have another question from Rashid, who comes in with: will AI overtake human intelligence, or will it work with human intelligence? If this is implemented in HR field, human resources, there would be chances to loss of talents due to selection of someone based on machine inputs.
Right. So you have two questions actually. So let me answer the first part here. Will AI eventually replace human? That is, I think they have this Science article that was published probably last week or the week before. Okay, there was one of the questions inside there. One of the $1 million question. Will human be replaced by AI or AI replace human? It's hard to tell. Okay, when we want to talk about replacement, we are talking about like strong AI, singularity, where the AI, the robots need to have self-awareness, consciousness. So is that possible? It's hard to tell. But in the first place, do we understand what is consciousness? What's awareness? We are not sure as well. We know that we are aware of ourselves, but how come we are aware of ourselves? We also do not know that. Okay, so that's something that's very interesting. Maybe it's an emergent property. Once you have enough knowledge about a lot of things, this self-awareness, self-consciousness becomes possible. Now, of course, you can look at it from a lot of different perspectives. You look at talk to Elon Musk. He has been proposing this. What's the theory? He basically said that we are not even real human. Most likely, we are simulated by some other intelligence. We are just simulated beings talking about things over here. We are not really real. Okay, we are just games by some other aliens. Okay, so from his point of view, well, we may not be real in the first place. Okay, so this is another interesting aspect that we can look into, but these are more towards the sci-fi, science fiction side. So what's our second question again? You're talking about what was
how jobs would probably be taken over due to job loss due to basically in implementation of AI. And
that one is, I would say, a lot of job loss will not be avoidable, right? So because a lot of companies are still trying to maximize profit. If they can gain more from using robots, like warehouse. You look at a lot of the warehouses, just go to YouTube and Google. They are all using robots. Okay, why are robots better? First, there's no sick leave. Okay, they work 24 hours a day. You don't have to turn on the air conditioning. You don't even have to turn on the lights. You can save a lot of electricity, right? And they can just work around 24/7. No holidays, nothing, right? And they are, if you can perfect it and the job is a structured job, a structured task, that's probably a lot of efficiency and effectiveness involved. Right? It's hard for a human to compete on that level. Okay, so some of the jobs will inevitably be lost to robots and AI. That is expected. Okay, so how we can retrain, reskill as many workers as possible to take on higher cognitive skill set level job will be important, so that they can have a better life, okay, a better income. Okay, so that's one thing we're trying to do, but we also have to recognize that most likely some of the people will not be able to follow. Okay, they will be left behind. So how can we take care of them? Okay, I mentioned just now earlier about the useless class. Some people call those people that are perpetually jobless, useless class. They still need to live. Like universal basic income may be a way to solve the problem. Okay, so we have to take care of society, not just how we can. We do not want to have, like, one of the big thing now is the wealth gap between the rich people and the poor people. I think it's today or yesterday I saw this news. Top 1% of the people in the US now control 89% of the wealth in the US. 1% controlling 89% of the wealth. Okay, so that is a big thing. How can we take care of the rest of the people? They unfortunately may not be able to catch up. Yeah, and how can we narrow the wealth gap? So there's a lot of things that we can do to look into all this.
I mean, in some context, Keng, even we want to actually lose the job for robot, because see, for example, sewerage cleaning.
Right.
Yeah. For example, in mining,
right,
coal mining, who want to go inside? For example, working with the steel plants, where actually it's very dangerous for human beings.
Right.
So those jobs, obviously, we want to give to robot, to do it safely, to do it without being harming to human being.
Right.
So some cases is desirable, of course. In all other cases, as you said, we bound to lose unless we actually reskill ourselves to do something else. It's going to happen. Nobody
so
can...
from our point of view, from a third party point of view, it makes a lot of sense. Some of this dangerous job, like mining job, should be maybe done by the machine, or even from the company's point of view, then they can save out a lot of insurance. Now, if you look at it from the workers' point of view, some of them, they are how many generations? They all be miners, okay, doing all this coal mining or mining something underground. They may not have a job if they lose their job. So that's something that we have to take care of. Yeah. So how can we ensure that if we replace their job with, let's say, safety, for their own safety, but they still have to eat. So how can we take care of that? Yeah. So we need to take care of those people that needs help. Yeah. How to reskill them, how to retrain them so that they can get better jobs. Yeah. Less dangerous job, but better job. Yeah.
Absolutely. True that. And thank you, Professor Siau, for that. We have another question coming in from Yang Lu, and who says, thank you very much for this inspiring presentation, Professor Siau. You mentioned about the ethical principles for AI application and virtue as framework for design of AI. Could you please introduce more on the justice and fairness issues in AI applications, especially in the e-commerce field? Thank you.
That's very good. I'll certainly look into that and try to introduce more justice and fairness. Maybe we can discuss more. Send me an email, then we can collaborate. Yeah. So the problem I have is the time. I'm pretty involved as an administrator, so I have a limited time. I hope I can expand my time. So actually, I don't mind cloning myself, 2 or 3 Keng working in parallel, but that's illegal. Or have an AI that can actually help me to do some of the work, right? So at least I can have more time to do something that I like, which is doing research. But I still have to do my admin work. So that's a problem. 24 hours a day, I cannot just expand it. Yeah, but it's an interesting area, e-commerce area, definitely. I think as Yogesh mentioned and Dr. Raman mentioned just now. Yeah, so a lot of the ethical principle. You just Google something and then suddenly all the emails start coming in trying to market you certain products. Is that ethical? Yeah, sometimes you have to spend a lot of time deleting all those emails. You may actually end up wasting a lot of time. Yeah, so that's also some of the issues involved in security, privacy. And one time I was, I shouldn't tell you guys, but don't go and Google me. But one time I Googled myself and I found that they have very accurate information about me, where I stay, all those things. Oh, come on, this is really scary. Yeah, all inside the system. Yeah, so that shouldn't happen. Okay, we should have our privacy. They should not try to combine everything. All our information together. Yeah, and then they actually have a fairly accurate understanding of a lot of people because all the information that you left behind on the internet. Yeah.
That's very true. It is truly very scary, Professor Siau. So as you rightly put together, that was our last question for today evening. And thank you actually for being very patient with the Q&A process as well. As I understand, it's already 9:30 p.m. in the night for you already in Hong Kong. And thank you for answering all the questions
no problem.
very patiently and throwing light on a very emerging topic. At the same time, a very confusing yet scary domain, which is ethical issues in AI. Thank you very much, Professor Siau, for taking out time today and sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you, Yogesh sir, as always, for supporting us and on this knowledge venture. And without your support, I'm sure none of this would have actually been possible. So thank you for bringing all this and putting all this together, sir.
So again, thank you for the invitation. It's been a really exciting and interesting area, and I really enjoy all this discussion. I learned a lot from all the questions, and I hope that we can all collaborate. If you're interested, collaborate with me, just send me an email. We can work together, and hopefully that will result in a better future for humanity.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Keng.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Siau. Thank you, Yogesh, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you to all the participants for joining in and sharing your questions as well. Thank you. Have a great day ahead. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.